What's going on, people? So I saw trending on Facebook people talking about Dave Chappelle. So I decided to go and watch that special, Sticks and Stones, that Dave Chappelle did. Dave Chappelle is one of my favorite comedians. I'm a fan of comedians and impressionists. I've always been impressed with impressionists since I was a child. As a matter of fact, my favorite impressionist was Rich Little. I used to always watch Rich Little when I was a child. But comedians I've always been a fan of comedians. Even thought about doing stand-up comedian myself. I thought about doing the Apollo in Harlem. At one time they had amateur night at the Apollo, and I thought about doing amateur night. But I've always been a fan of comedy. Now, I watched the special, and Dave Chappelle, I must commend him because he's the only comedian that had nerve enough to stand up and touch on every topic that's considered sensitive in this day and time. Everything he spoke on was offensive to somebody, and he expected pushback from that. He had also received pushback on a lot of the comedy or a lot of the jokes that he spoke on. But there was one part in that special where even I became silent, and that was when he started speaking on pedophilia. And I don't know if a lot of y'all caught it, but the audience seemed to be, they seemed to be too relaxed at those jokes. I became silent because I'm like, that's not a laughing matter. But people were comfortable with him telling those jokes. Even to the point where he said, what's the name? Culkin or something like that? The child that was in Home Alone. He said that I'm not a pedophile. Then he says, but if I was, I would F Maccaulay. Now, that's something that you just don't joke about. That's like a straight man or a heterosexual man joking about being gay. He started acting like he's being gay. That reminds me of a lot of females on Facebook that would jokingly post that they're thinking about getting a woman. They go through a bad relationship and they say, I'm just going to go ahead and get me a woman, just to kind of feel people's reactions. So then you have all these females inboxing them, commenting, letting them know that they themselves are available to them. They're encouraging them to do that. And then later on down the line, this person comes out as a lesbian or as bisexual. Dave Chappelle, if he's not a pedophile, and I got the impression that he was speaking to a certain group of people, it's almost like that's his sacrifice, or he's in the process of making a sacrifice. And I know a lot of people speak conspiracy theories and talk about sacrificing and how this celebrity made a sacrifice and how this person that came up dead was a sacrifice. But there's different types of sacrifices, man. For him to stand up in front of a crowd and be recorded saying that he would screw not only an underage child, but an underage male child. So he's not only saying that he would screw an underage boy and even gave an age of 14 years old, but he also said he would screw a male, which is accepting or in a way coming out as a homosexual. You will screw a male child, and the crowd was comfortable with him telling these jokes. People were laughing. There were a few people that became silent, but for the most part, people were laughing at his jokes and they accepted it. No one got angry, no one got offended. So why was it so easy for Dave Chappelle to stand up and not only speak about gays and even refer to them as faggots? And you know, if we talk like that on social media, we get banned. But he stand up in front of a live crowd and is recorded referring to them as faggots. And not only that, he stood up in front of a live crowd being recorded saying that he would screw an underage boy. Pedophilia and homosexual. So he's speaking of pedophilia and homosexuality. He said he would do that. He said that he would screw not a girl, not an underage female, but an underage boy. And then he started talking about how he would do it. See, so did y'all really catch that? Do you really care? Because that's the environment that we live today, man. And when you have these people talking about opening the border, letting all these illegal immigrants in, and then we start hearing about all of this child sex trafficking and the money that's being made, and then the adults that's sleeping with these children, and then we start hearing the news of couples being arrested for having child pornography and how they're taking their children and selling their children. You know, they're renting their children out. You know, they receive money to have photos taken of their kids, and they're watching sex acts among strangers that paid them and even family members. But this crowd that he was performing in front of was comfortable with that. And notice, people weren't upset that he spoke on pedophilia. They were upset, and they posted a portion of what he said was when he was talking about how you people, because everybody was saying Trump, and he said, who is this? He did the two impressions at first, and he said, who is this? And then he did another impression, and he said, you MFs, right? That's what they showed in the newspaper. But nobody mentioned anything about the pedophilia and him saying that he would screw a boy. That's something you just don't joke about. That's something a heterosexual man does not talk about. You don't talk about screwing a child, and you don't talk about screwing another dude. Same sex. But Dave Chappelle joked about that. And people were comfortable with that. No one seemed to be offended by that. But that's the climate that we live in today, where it's accepted. So that's almost like him dry snitching on himself. That's like him catering to the Hollywood crowd. In masonry, when you have dudes that go to like the Red House, or they move up in masonry, they have to, like, I guess, cross the burning sand or the desert sand or whatever they call it. And you have dudes that would have to put on a dress, and they have to come out in public wearing a dress, right? That's a part of, them going to the next degree in masonry, right? Depending upon what level they are, right? So they have to put on a dress. They are not homosexuals, but they have to put on a dress and they have to come out in public. Well, that's how I looked at Dave Chappelle standing up telling that joke. And I don't look at that as a joke. He stood up and says, I'm not a pedophile, but I would F this little boy. And he called him by name, which means he already had an image in his mind of that boy. For you to call out a particular person by name, that tells a story within itself. That right there says that you looked at that little boy in some kind of way. At some point in time, you looked at that little boy sexually. And now you stand up and you tell jokes. And then if someone speak out against it, you could come back with their jokes. But is it really a joke? Because it was in your heart and you spoke on it. Many comedians speak on real life events. So maybe that's a real life event in his mind. That was in his heart at one point in time. He saw that little boy and had sexual desires towards that little boy. Right? Did y'all find that quite odd for those of you who saw that? And did you watch the reaction of the crowd? And they laughed at him talking about screwing a little boy? Would they have had that same reaction? Or would they have been that comfortable if he talked about screwing a little girl? But he talked about screwing a little boy, and he called that boy by name. Let me get his name right. Let me Google that right quick. Maccaulay Culkin. That's the name. And it's a dude. It's that boy in Home Alone that he said he would screw. This is who Dave Chappelle said he was sex. Now, for Dave Chappelle, he would have had to have that image in his mind. And some point in time, he had that image of screwing that little boy in his mind, because for you to stand up in front of a live crowd and be recorded saying that you would screw a child. First he says, I'm not a pedophile. He didn't say I'm not gay. He did not say I'm not bisexual. He says I'm not a pedophile. But I would screw that boy. That underage boy. But that's the climate we live in today, where it's becoming more and more and more accepted, where more and more children are being targeted. Children are being kidnapped. Children are being molested, being raped. They're being sold off as sex slaves. That's today's environment. So who was Dave Chappelle speaking to? Was he speaking to the audience, or was he speaking to Hollywood? Because Dave Chappelle took a break for a while. Now he's coming back. So does he have to prove his loyalty to someone? And they say, okay, that's like a thug, man. You joining the gang, and they say, okay, well, we got to jump you in. Or they'll give you a task to see how loyal you are. Okay, if you loyal, then you will go and put a bullet in that woman's head over there. That woman that's pushing that baby stroller, go take that woman out. And that right there tells if you're really serious about joining that gang, or if you're loyal. Or they would have something on you. So what did y'all think of Dave Chappelle, man? But it's just ironic, man. It's not ironic. It's just quite strange at the crowd, man, and how they received him talking about screwing an underage boy. Right after he says I'm not a pedophile, then he talked about screwing an underage boy, not a girl, a boy. So, but other than that, I applaud him because he's one of the only comedians that stood up and went against the grain. See, he went against the grain and he's speaking on topics that's considered sensitive in this day and time. So, feedback, tell me what you think, subscribe, click on the Cash App button or link in the description box and financially support this channel. Till next time, I'm fearless.